Is it on now?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay. All right, so we're going to probably wait for another couple of minutes on Ms. Honeycutt, Mr. Darby, and Reverend Middleton. And if they don't, we would just go ahead and they can play catch up when they come because we don't want to hold people too long. So give us a couple of minutes and we'll start.
Too many things. Thank you for getting here. I will, yeah. I'm gonna call you.
Right, see what's going on, yeah.
We're gonna continue at least for do 1 year today, and I'll see if it's just a flavor thing, she's gonna be
Yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like perfect. But it is like that's a scary thing. I just want to take a picture next time because it is like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Like
Was it foaming out of her mouth? Yeah, that happened to Jupiter got so sick earlier this year, and I had to give him.
Where's he at? Okay, this is his meeting. He's supposed to be chairing it, so all right. Hope he walks in.
He just walked past. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the chairman is here, Mr. Darby.
You weren't waiting on me.
Yes, sir. This your committee.
He's putting his tie on.
Yeah. Hey, he looked better. Okay, so we're going to start with our Planning and Public Works Committee agenda. Mr. Darby is the chair and everybody participates. Mr. Darby, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Salisbury?
Item 1A is the minutes of July 7th.
Move for approval.
Second.
Properly moved. And second, any questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. No opposers, stands approved. Ms. Salisbury?
The next item is 2 rezoning requests, and Ms. Pickett is here to
Move for approval
make
on
the
2A and 2B.
presentations.
Properly moving second. Is it? All in favor? Discussion?
Yeah.
Question. Come on, sir.
Can we split those apart?
Yes, sir. I take A first and B second. But my motion is to approve A.
Second that.
Okay, any, Mr. Darby?
Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Stands approved.
Item 2B, Latson Road. I move to approve.
Properly moved and second. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Just wanted to find out, the Planning Commission and staff both recommended disapproval for this. I just wanted to find out what their issues were with this.
Yes, sir. Happy to clarify. So the staff recommendation, as you know, staff is bound by the future land use designation as set forth in the comprehensive plan.
And this property actually has two different future land use designations, which you can see here. The front portion of the property has a future land use of commercial. The rear portion of the property has a future land use of civic institutional. And since the uses in the commercial zoning district expand beyond what would be allowed in civic institutional, staff had to recommend disapproval.
Any other, yes, Mr. Sass?
Yes, sir. The area to the right that's sort of gray, is that industrial?
So the area that's in the kind of tan color?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Yes, so that is within the city of North Charleston, and that is zoned light industrial.
Light industrial, that's
Yes, sir.
what I thought. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Any other questions or concerns? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, forgive me, sir.
So, Planning Commission, though, voted unanimously against. Why?
Correct. They went along with the staff recommendation.
Okay, and did they, were there any major reasons on why?
There was no discussion at the time.
Any,
Clarify, my motion was for planning commission recommendation, which is denial. Okay, that's my motion. I want to make sure I'm clear, because this is in my district. My newly drawn district.
Yes,
Okay, I second this.
All right, Ms. Johnson seconded. Thank you.
okay. Yes, sir.
certainly. Thank you very much, Mr. Darby. And I was going to just chime in based on Mr. Pryor's newly redistrict area. You know, certainly looking at this, the church, which is a stone's throw away from this property, and then the school, which is across the street, it gives me pause and concern. And I think I asked the last time this came before us relative to the civic institutional use, and we were still kind of foggy and unclear as to if ever, you know, however they would use that, you know, in a civic or institutional way. And just with all of those, you know, considerations, particularly with the school and the church, you know, it just seems to be proper to uphold the recommendation.
Okay. Any, yes, sir, Mr. Sass?
Actually, two more questions. So at this time, the front portion of this site is zoned community commercial. Is that correct? Or it's zoned some sort of commercial use?
No, sir.
No, sir.
So it's currently all zone general office.
Okay.
But it is that future land use designation that's split currently.
And so going back to that future land use designation page, the front portion of the subject property we're talking about and the adjoining property, it is recommended that be, is that red? Is that commercial?
Yes, sir, that's correct. And this property was originally two separate parcels. So that's kind of how that split came to be when the property line was abandoned.
And so the zoning request would be for the entire parcel.
That's correct, yes,
The
sir.
assembled parcel to be zoned commercial. Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Any other concerns or questions? All in favor? Aye. Those opposed? None? Stands approved. Ms. Salisbury?
The next item is proposed amendments to the noise ordinance. I don't think there's a presentation, it's just
Okay.
what's in your,
I'll move to approve that documentation.
Any concerns, questions?
I have a question.
Oh, yes, sir.
Does this coordinate well with the adjoining municipalities? I always want us to, on something like this especially, kind of follow their lead, because I think that's a lot of what we're trying to do is make our zoning consistent with the adjoining zoning. Is that part of what we do here?
Yes, it came about more about the complaints we were getting, but it just so happened coincidentally simultaneously while we were working on this, the town of Mount Pleasant was also working on their noise ordinance, and it's my understanding that the city of North Charleston is also looking at theirs. The town of Mount Pleasant has adopted theirs, but yes, they are, the municipalities and areas are now looking at this decibel reading as a way to enforce the noise ordinances that they have on the books, and that's what this does.
and I think I seconded this. I will support this, but with some reservation, I will say a lot of places that are becoming more urbanized now, we're rural, and the folks living there were living by rural rules. And they enjoy things like shooting guns, safe and legal, you know. Those sorts of things are creating some conflict now. And this might bring some of that to light. And there are no easy solutions to those conflicts. So again, with some hesitation, I support this, but it will be interesting to see what comes of it in the future.
Well, I have a question about this then. So, Mr. Evans,
Yes, ma'am.
because I'm thinking about on James Island, I do hear, gun shooting, and I didn't think people were doing any hunting still over there. But how do we handle gun shooting everywhere? Whether you are in close proximity of the neighbors or you're just 5 miles away. Do we have any reference to that kind of thing?
Councilmember Johnson, I think there might be some folks from the Sheriff's Department here tonight that might help me answer that. I do know that in the county, you're allowed to discharge a firearm. The specifics of the distance, I'm not sure that. The Sheriff's Department deals with that. So I don't know if someone is here from the Sheriff's Department that could answer that, but I don't see anyone. Oh,
Mr. Darby,
Yes, sir.
why don't we do this? Why don't we move this along until Tuesday? And
And
have
we can get
somebody
some
from the
answers.
sheriff department to come and give us some answers. Because I'm concerned what Mr. Swears said as well, too. We don't want to hurt the people, that are doing, but we're abiding by the law and doing the right thing. So if we could, why don't we just pass this out of committee, and then when it comes to finance on Tuesday, we would ask the sheriff to have somebody here to answer the questions that, we need to.
One more comment.
ahead, please.
And the sheriff is who gets called, the sheriff's offices, deputies, they are who get called in the rural area. I live in the rural area, I see it all the time. The sheriff is involved in way too many noise complaints, and it's a challenge though. I'm not saying who's right or wrong. Sometimes it depends. But the sheriff is the best one to answer that question.
Okay, I'll accept that for Tuesday.
What do you want to do,
Mr. Moody?
Thank you, Mr. Darby. Mr. Swears, I agree with you. The noise, we have the sheriffs come to West Ashley a lot too. We have a lot of donut holes, and they get called for loud music and things like that. And one of the complaints I had heard from law enforcement when I would follow up with them is that they didn't have, Mr. Evans mentioned the decibels, they didn't have a measurable way to enforce this. It was really subjective. Is this bothering the neighbors? Is this, there was no real line in the sand that they could enforce. And so I think part of this, the change of this is giving them some rules to follow that will be enforceable. Is that correct, Mr. Evans? Did I sum that up?
Yes, sir, that's exactly right. That along with defining the hours better for the sheriff's deputies to do the enforcement.
Yep.
Yes.
And Mr. Evans, just one more question about that. Is there a specific type of noise that we're talking about? I mean, I've gotten calls about dogs barking in certain areas associated with kennels that are legally operating, or is this more directed towards commercial operations like restaurants shutting down earlier? Is there something it's specifically designed to target?
It's not specifically designed to target anything. I think it's any noise other than what's under the exemptions.
Okay.
Most of our noise complaints that I can tell you that we receive from code enforcement, and I think from the sheriff's deputy as well, is usually the nighttime noise from music.
Okay.
When it's close to outdoor music, when it's close to neighbors.
Mr. Sass?
Thank you, Mr. Darby. Mr. Evans, I think I'm kind of in favor of this. I have a elderly gentleman lives up on Highway 17, just past Highway 41, and there's Mount Pleasant there's some Mount Pleasant property on the corner of 41 with a couple of restaurants and hotels, and there's one in there that was playing a lot of music, and he said he could sit in his living room and hear the music while he was in bed. And we had numerous calls for both the Mount Pleasant police and the sheriff's office have responded to those calls. And so I'm glad to hear that we're going to get some coordination there, because it was everybody was getting pretty frustrated. There wasn't any way to work that. And the poor gentleman, you know, he was the most frustrated of all, of course.
Right.
But I think that's going to work out pretty good. Thank you.
Good.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, you want this voted upon, or you want to follow through?
No, we're going to vote it and move it forward.
Okay, any other concerns? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It stands approved. Thank you so very much, Mr. Pryor.
All right, Mr. Chairman, so now we're going to move into our Finance Committee agenda. Well, all members of council get to participate. I'm the chair of that committee. The first item is minutes of June
To
21.
approve.
Okay, 21/7/12 of July 2022. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Moody. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Ayes have it. All right, so I'm going to move these presentations to the back end of our meeting so we can conduct business. So if anybody wants to leave with these resolutions and our consent agenda, they will do so. So I'm going to put number 2 on the bottom of our agenda. Item number 3 is resolutions honoring David Bennett, Ashley
For
Pennington.
approval, all
and
3 items.
Second by Ms. Johnson, moved by Mr. Moody. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it, Ms. Johnson.
I just want to make one comment about honoring Mr. Bennett here. In the rural area, they started making, providing funding for projects like the parks and the recreation at Solid Green and Hollywood, and also Parker's Ferry. And those are areas that are way far out. They don't have any kind of recreation real close by. So I really am appreciative that he moved forward kind of quickly in the last couple of years to be able to get funding to help those communities. So I just wanted to say thank you. I might not get a chance to say it again. I just have to say it right now.
Okay, all right. So now, we move to item number 4, which is a consent agenda. So do y'all want to take it one item at a time, or y'all want to just go ahead and make a motion for, what is the pleasure?
Move to approve 4A through M.
Is there a second? Second. All right, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. So now we move to item number 5, where there's one appointment for the St. Andrews Parks and Playground, one for the Aviation Authority.
Second.
Move for approval for A and B by
Yes.
Ms. Johnson, who seconded? Second by Reverend Middleton. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Item 6, you have A, B, and C, which is easements.
Yeah.
Move for
Those three
approval. Is there a second? Second by Reverend Milton. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Ayes have it. Okay, 7, A through D, what is the pleasure?
Move to approve.
Is there a second? Second by Ms. Johnson. Any discussion?
Just one question.
Yes, sir.
There's at least one eminent domain, I think maybe even, there are 2 of them. And both of those are actually friendly condemnations, isn't that correct?
Yeah, and I know for the 7D, we are in complete agreement with that, and the community stands behind it.
Yeah, great.
I stand behind it too, because I would have to fight like heck to try to get this back to a point where they can get drainage straightened out, so yes.
Yes.
Hey, these crossover districts doing these redistricting.
I'm telling
something
you.
else, man. All right, Jim, so everybody is good with 7A through
Get on
D.
that.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Yes.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Okay. All right, so we have, 3 presentations. We got 8, 9, and then go back to 2, correct? Yeah.
Okay.
We've got, item number 8 is not presented.
Okay, it's not a presentation?
No, sir.
Okay, item number 8 is FY '23 Community Investment Allocations. So.
Move for approval, item
Second.
8A.
Moving in second. Anybody need any explanation, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Paul's Fire District bonds.
Move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Reverend Milton. Any discussion?
Just a quick question.
Yes, sir.
For Mr. Gile, if you can answer it, and if not, somebody can answer it on Tuesday. St. Paul's, they are very financially stable now.
They are much improved than they were 5 years ago, and yes, they seem to have turned the
The
corner
future
on
looks
us.
bright.
I wouldn't say bright, but I think it's manageable.
This is putting out fires, so I guess the future looks dim.
They are in a good financial condition, and this does not increase their millage.
Okay, any others? Since they're looking bright. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Item C is advisory and master planning services.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Two different things, y'all.
That's the award of the contract for 995 planning services. Second by Ms. Johnson. Any discussion?
Sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want a reminder of who's the firm? Maybe I should remember this, but maybe we had the summer break.
Can anybody tell them who this firm is?
Element
We
Strategies.
need to negotiate before we do it. Which one is it? Since this is a RFQ, do we need? Okay.
So we have to negotiate a price.
Okay, so does this come back to us?
This has to come back to you
Okay.
because it's an RFQ.
I guess my questions are a little premature because you'll work out the scope and then bring that back to us with the price?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And
I'm good.
And Mr. Winter, I believe this is the same group that we're using for the housing plan, thing.
Good.
Development strategies. So we just need to get a price. Okay. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Okay. All right, now, I'm going to go to 9A, which is Arpa presentations. Okay, so Mr. Davis. And I would ask that you hold your questions until he's finished with the presentation, write them down, and then I'll recognize you if you raise your hand. So that way you won't get distracted.
Good evening, and it is my pleasure to bring you the final portion of the plan to spend the remaining ARPA funds, to allocate and spend the remaining ARPA funds. And we'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. Just an overview, the American Rescue Plan Act came to Charleston County 2021, just under $80 million for the uses that you see up there, which most of us are already familiar with. Council had four priorities for our department to consider: making Charleston County whole, accessibility and connectivity, economic stability for all, and resilience and infrastructure. This was truly a county-wide effort. We met with, we had dozens of roundtables and public meetings, and all of the groups that you see up there are groups that we met with who had input into this plan. And those that you see in yellow are actively working on programs for the allocations that we're asking for tonight. And I think there's a few of those people in the audience. If you could stand real briefly. That's part of our project team that are working to put together some of the programs, thank you, that you will see come before you tonight. Our agenda, we're going to show you the overall summary of the big picture of what the finished program would look like. Then we'll take a quick look at the previous commitments, the things that County Council has already approved, and then we'll ask for our new requests. So starting with the overall summary, this is what the plan would look like if all of the allocations were approved the way we're asking, and you will see that fully half of the funds allocated to us by the federal government would be specifically for programming that directly benefit county residents, and that's economic security for all. And we have addressed all of council's priorities. Most of the making Charleston County whole came from lost revenue. There was also lost revenue funds spent in other places as well. But that is what the total plan would look like. And to walk through our previous commitments real briefly, council set aside $20 million specifically for housing, and has already allocated $39.4 million towards different programs. So under Making Charleston County Whole, $21.7 million to those projects that you see there. $1.3 million to the coroner's office under accessibility and connectivity for public safety. Economic stability for all, a total of $10.1 million, which is for the scattered sites, the women and children's shelter, critical home repairs, and the pandemic relief for micro businesses and nonprofits. Under resilience and infrastructure, 4 projects for a total of $2.5 million. And for administrative expenses, the county created this department, created the reporting dashboard, and covered administrative costs for the scattered site and the critical repairs program for a total of $39.4 million. And now for our new requests. Again, council has allocated $39 million, reserved $20 million for housing, which leaves $20.4 million that we are asking you to allocate tonight. A brief look back at where we started. This is the overall plan. We broke that down into past and present requests, and we want to deal specifically with those 4 sections, those 4 colored sections that you see there. Accessibility and connectivity, economic security, resilience and infrastructure, and administrative costs. Under accessibility and connectivity, we're asking for $900,000 for the county's IT department to cover privileged access management and network access control. Unfortunately, most of their department is out with COVID, couldn't be here tonight, but we do have some information if you need on exactly what those are. And then, of course, they can fill you in on any details as well. Now, I do want to briefly cover 3 of the county's subcategories for this area that are not addressed in the budget, but are addressed in the plan. Broadband and digital equity, there was infrastructure money available and state broadband funds available. And so the guidance to counties was not to use that money, not to use ARPA funds for those because there was other funds available. The same with bike and pedestrian pathways. There's infrastructure funds available for that, and we have the county's Greenbelt program. Now, equal access to county services in rural areas was a little more complicated. This is a big county, and a lot of our rural communities have different needs, as you well know. So what you'll see later in this presentation is a request to do some community data mapping. And that is an effort that will better inform us on exactly what these communities need. And one of the best examples that I can give you is that when we were working on the nonprofit programs, what we realized is that we have a lot of nonprofits, large and small, that all work in North Charleston, a lot of them duplicating services in many instances. And if we can work with those, which we'll talk about during our nonprofit program, and we will get the data as to what services are needed where, we can better allocate all of these people who are out here already doing the work. We can get them to where the work is needed most. So our first our recommended committee action is to approve $900,000 in ARPA funding for county cybersecurity and authorize staff to execute procurements as appropriate.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. All right, so that's 900. Next one.
Under economic security for all, we're asking for $9.7 million for these 6 programs. First, the community data and mapping, which I just discussed, for $850,000. The second phase of micro-business pandemic relief for $2 million. Under building grassroots capacity, nonprofit capacity building for $4 million. And I think there's some very exciting things happen there. We've brought some pretty big players in the nonprofit world together to work together on how to address that. And we've also brought in some smaller nonprofits to make sure that they are included in the process. Under nonprofit special projects, $1 million. That is specifically for small nonprofits. And $1 million set aside for settlement communities. And finally, under behavioral health, staff equipment and systems for DEOTUS in the amount of $870,000 for a total of $9.7 million. So our recommended committee action number 2 is to approve $1.72 million in ARPA expenditures for county purchases and authorize staff to execute those procurements, and then $8 million in program commitments for staff to create those specific programs to be brought back to council for approval. So those programs in yellow will come back to council for approval.
Let me ask you a question before we move for this. All right, so in the first money that we had allotted for these small businesses, we did not give out all of that money, correct?
That's correct.
So how much of that money do we still have left? Is that included in this?
That is not included in this. When we bring the remaining businesses back to you, which I believe will be next council meeting,
Okay.
The money that's remaining, we will ask you how to allocate that money.
Okay,
So that
good.
will be separate.
All right, I don't need a number, all right. Secondly, the people out in the Snowden area with this sewer problem that they had and the town was allowing them, I think they were asking for something like $4 million.
That's request number 4, sir.
Okay, I just want to make sure that, yeah, because I see some, okay.
Move to approve.
All right, there's a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Darby. Any discussion? Okay, I'll go with Mr. Werman, then come down to Mr. Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Davis. I just, this sounds very good. I think, this is certainly seems like something that we can use. We've talked about capacity building before. Could you maybe just give me a little bit deeper dive and a little bit more of an illustration of what that would look like?
Sure.
I get that it's coming back to us, and obviously there's a program that needs to be more specifically developed, but I just want to have a little clearer vision of what that is.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things we found during the first nonprofit pandemic relief program is that a lot of nonprofits are out in the community doing good work, but they can't accept federal funds because they either lack bookkeeping, they have their boards are not put together properly, or things like that. And so we want to work with those and to help build capacity. And the other thing is, Charleston County has a pretty active philanthropic community, and they are not eligible to receive those funds either because their boards are not set up properly and they don't do proper paperwork. It took my staff quite a while to help some of these organizations get to the full 50,000 that they were eligible for, and we still have some that couldn't quite make it. So we want to help build capacity in those organizations so they can receive those funds.
Okay, I think that sounds certainly like something I can support. I do wonder, and maybe this is more of a program implementation question, but I do wonder, I would love to be able to start measuring how successful we're being in doing that. I don't know exactly how you would do that in that context, and if we have to take a leap of faith, I think that, fair enough. I mean, that's maybe the situation that we're stepping into, trying to build that type of capacity. But if there is a way in the implementation that we can kind of track that and measure it and try and put some quantity on the impact we're having, I'd certainly love to see that.
ARPA reporting requires that we track that, so we will be having performance measures and bringing those back to you so you can see them.
All right, very good. Thank you.
Mr. Moody.
Yeah, thank you. Follow up to the chairman's question, and similar to Mr. Werman, Mr. Davis, when we did the first round of micro business, similar organizational problems with businesses where they didn't have articles of organization, they didn't have tax ID numbers, very low hurdles we had set up that they were not able, and I think we were going to put forth effort to help some of those folks get in compliance. Can you speak broadly?
Sure.
Not details, but how has that effort gone?
Well, you're exactly right. It has been a struggle. We had to turn away some businesses that we really did not want to turn away, but we just couldn't get there under federal regulations. So part of that $2 million you see up there, we have brought some nonprofits that work with small businesses on a regular basis, and they will help us get those businesses to where they need to be. And some of that money will filter directly into the small businesses once they can meet those metrics, that they have proper bookkeeping and can actually receive the federal funds.
Thank you. I think that's wonderful, and I just want to make sure we don't get ourselves in a position where we've got to pay that money back because we didn't take those extra steps. But helping them to get organized, I think, is worthwhile. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anybody else? Ms. Johnson?
Mr. Davis, you know, I always have to ask about the rural area and how does that fit in with what you're doing right here. So I'm glad that you are talking about building grassroots capacity. But can you identify some things to me about what you're looking at doing in the rural area? We used to have an organization in the rural area, the one by Miss Linda Gatson, Rural Mission. And that was a big thing, on the islands at one time, and that's no more. And since that's gone, then we have these other little, smaller organizations that's out there. We really do need to have a few good, strong nonprofits out there. So tell me your vision of how you see trying to build this up in the rural area.
The first step is actually getting out there and making the connections and making sure they have the information. We were just out at Edisto today, as a matter of fact, with the housing plan, and we met some of the pastors out there. That was a very nice meeting. But just number one, making sure they get the information, and a lot of times they can start to tell us what's needed out there. We've met with the mayors and the city staffs at some of the rural communities, but just getting out into the community is the first step. And then as we start to build that data mapping model, it will begin to show us where the specific needs are, and we can start to address it that way. But again, the main thing at this point is just to make sure that they have the information and that, that we're out there talking to them to get the process started.
Well, as you do that, I really would like to have an opportunity to probably get some people in touch with you, some organization leaders who I know that are out there that are kind of small, because I don't know how you're going to identify them when they don't have a big presence.
Absolutely.
And so that to me is a problem. And I don't want to see that the rural communities are being left out. So we've got to really work at beating the bush for that. I'm willing to help you do that with some names. But, well, you understand my dilemma here?
Yes, ma'am. And you have my word on that.
If they don't get any money, I'm going to be very upset.
Absolutely.
Let me ask this question here, and maybe it might be to my ignorance. So I see a gentleman sitting out to my left over there. I've been working with for years. Shout out Mr. Singleton, Casdale Singleton. This man right there, he's been in the banking world for a while, and then he got out. Now he's with the Palmetto Action Committee. They do a lot with light bill, water bill, housing, rent, and all that other stuff. My question is, can we partner up somehow with these people, because they can do a lot more with what we give them and cut down on all the staff time, and the money will be basically spent toward helping the people, instead of you out there researching for these things. He already got a database, okay? They already connected to the government. They know what needs to be done. So are we looking into partnering with people like that? To help
They are already at the table. They're working on us with 2 different proposals, I believe.
Well,
but they are already at the table.
I'm just telling you, got a good man there, because he took over after Arnold Collins, and he took it to another level. And matter of fact, me and Mr. Darby serve on that board, but we have a proxy that goes for us when we can't make it, and they do some wonderful work. So there's where we can take money, and they can do more with $1 million than we can do with $10 million.
Absolutely. And we will do a better job at getting you the information ahead of time so you can recommend different organizations that you want to make sure are involved.
Well, he is in the game. That's good. And he serves everybody in the Charleston County area. That's what's good about it. So if he is in the game, I'm happy.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, there's a motion, yeah, okay, anybody else? I'm waiting on the questions.
Moved and seconded.
Yeah, but anybody got any move? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. Next.
All right. The third is resilience and infrastructure. We're asking for $5.5 million for 3 programs. The first is the Snowden Water and Sewer Phase 2 project to finish out that community. Those are matching funds, so Mount Pleasant Water Works would be coming to the table with we'll match funds until that $4 million is expended. They've estimated 6 to 8 million, but they don't have a direct estimate yet, but we'll keep you informed on that one. The second is an interesting little program, $500,000 for settlement community and donut hole connections. So anyone who is adjacent to an existing line for Mount Pleasant Waterworks that lives in a settlement community or one of the donut holes, Mount Pleasant Waterworks will put up $4,500. Charleston County would put up $4,500 out of that pot, and any remaining, if there is, they could finance on their water bill. The third is $1 million to the county's existing well and septic program expansion. So the ask is to approve the $4.5 million for those matching funds programs and $1 million.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Sass, second by Reverend Middleton. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, ayes have it. Okay, next.
Okay. And finally, we have administrative expenses. And we are asking for, the $15,700 there was the remaining dollars after all those round numbers you saw. So we're asking to use that as contingency. We are asking for, we did not ask for administrative money for those early action programs. So we ended up using departmental money to cover some of those costs. And then finally, for future programs administrations, $3.2 million. And it's important to note that that also covers all of the housing programs that we would bring with the $20 million that you already set aside.
Okay.
And the ask is 3.625 in administrative and 15,700 in contingency.
Okay, is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second. Yeah.
Second by Ms. Johnson, Reverend Middleton.
Yes, I'm very concerned still because, again, with the administrative expenses, certainly there are administrative costs associated with any program implementation, particularly this office. And so this will take you through 2026 or
take us through the remainder of the program.
The life of the program. So what happens after 2026 with this entire office, Housing and Neighborhood Revitalization Department? Again, I'm moving to approve this with an understanding that once ARPA dissolves or, we're finished with that program, all of these are very, very worthy initiatives. Will we then just stop? Or are we looking at a plan to further fund this type of work in this office?
It'll be up to this council how far they want to go, because, if you leave it up to staff would say, yeah, we'd like to, continue this to eternity, But, this body would have to make tough decisions, and future council would have to decide that once this money is out. So, present council can't bind future council. So, when it comes to these strategies, we may have to cut back with some and may not need all this because most of this is just start up. So a lot of that will go away, and then, I'm sure Mr. Rant can find grants, apply for grants and stuff to help us with this. He's done that in the past, but Mr. Rant, you want to speak to that?
Yes, sir. We are constantly evaluating where to put our staff with the needs that our programs require. So we have a number of different departments that have other federal funds. And so we're always looking as someone retires or leaves, which we know a lot of our folks are in that position now. We create long-term plans for how we move people. And we've done that a lot with the grant-funded positions that we've had in my directorate. That's sort of a standard that we work toward.
So when previous grant funds from funded positions run out and you still have staff persons left over after the grant cycle ends, you just reassign them into other programs?
It depends. Some of our grant-funded positions are revenue generating. So we transfer that position from a grant to the revenue generating, such as Deotis. Some move to other grant programs, and depending on, again, with what we know is the departure and retirement in our workforce in general, we're doing a lot of succession planning and getting people in positions to be ready to take over other positions if the grant ends. And this isn't something new. We've been doing this for 20 years. It's a standard process for us.
Well, this is an entire department that has been stood up, that has thriving programs that certainly that have a shelf life, but the needs will continue beyond. And you're saying that you'll find somewhere within your directorate to just fold those programs into?
We work toward that. And keep in mind, community development still exists. That program, that department's been here for 20 years. There are funds related to that. Those funds change. There's always different funds flowing in. So while obviously it would be an administrator decision in the end, we constantly are working for succession planning to move people to positions. That's pretty normal for us.
Thank you.
You go, okay. There's a motion, it's been duly seconded. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, ayes have it. You done? Or you got
Almost. If you would like, I could take just a couple of minutes to give you a preview of the of the housing plan for the $20 million that you set aside for housing. It's just a brief overview, if you'd like.
I'd like to see it, please.
Basically, it's just one slide. And this is just to show you our preliminary planning for the $20 million, and it'll give you an opportunity to give us some feedback that you could send to our department or talk to Ms. Durant if there's something here that you think needs to be changed or addressed. But what we're looking at is under capacity building. These are related to the 5 priorities in the draft housing plan that we gave you a couple weeks ago. Under capacity building, which we think is the most critical part of this, because Charleston County lacks development capacity to execute a long-term housing plan. So we want to put $3.5 million into Chodo capacity building, or nonprofits that want to develop housing, and some building trades, job training money. That's a smaller part that'll be set aside there. Reducing barriers to development, that is mostly staff work and administrative. So we set aside $250,000 for those costs. Production and preservation is where the bulk of the money would go. So far, we have $11.5 million set up for gap financing for 2 rounds, and then infill development and rehab in some of the urban and rural communities, actually, depending on the neighborhood. Under housing stability and security, there's homeless initiatives, placement assistance for voucher holders, and emergency relocation, $2.5 million set aside for that. And then under home ownership, home buyer assistance, and home buyer education, $2 million. And then finally, $250,000 for contingency and special projects. Any questions?
Okay.
Yes, sir. Mr. Davis, on the totality of it all, sir, I think you quoted over $7 million for administrative cost.
Believe, was it a total of
7.3?
Yes, that is right.
To whom is this going to?
So it goes a number of places. Some of it is county staff. One of the things that we try to keep administrative costs around between 6 and 7.5% for the first 2 programs. The biggest problem we ran into was staffing. We either had to hire an outside agency to do it or do it internally. So we tried to do temp staff for a while, which would have kept the cost kind of low, but you can't hire the kind of expertise that you need. So we ended up bringing in some organizations anyway. Most of that administrative money would go to outside organizations for the work that they do, but some of it is to run the actual department.
And that $7 million is what percentage of the totality?
9.2%. ARPA allows us 10%. We tried to keep it to 7.5%, but I think the first round of programs kind of showed us that this is not something you can really do on the cheap.
Thank you, sir.
So we probably had about 10 million set aside, so we only used the 7, right?
Correct.
So we're still saving $3 million.
Well, I'm sorry. No, there was a total of, we were allowed to, well, ARPA technically allows you to go up to 15%, but those rules get really complicated. So I made a department head decision to call it 10 across the board.
Right.
And then like I said, we're actually at 9.2. And again, all of that, the additional the first $3 million was to create the department.
Yes.
So those are not necessarily program related costs. That's a decision that the county made. So really our administrative cost to run the programs is more like, it'll probably be more like $4.5 million,
Yeah.
which is well under what is allowed by ARPA.
Okay. Mr. Werman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Davis, on the the gap financing and the infill development, I know you have been working hard to do this. Is this a situation where we kind of have some idea of folks lined up on this, or?
We've been working quite hard to get projects submitted, and we finally started getting them. We still only have about 8 or 9, which is very few for a county of this size. But it would easily, the projects that we have in house would easily, I believe, use that 11.5 million. But there will be some kind of process where we select those projects. Once there's an announcement made, I'm sure there will be additional projects. So we're going to try to bring a few as pilot programs so we can start off immediately. And then the remainder would go as, some sort of RFP or request for applications.
Very good. And certainly I think that relates to the emphasis you placed on capacity building at the front end of the presentation. And I certainly appreciate that. Listen, I'm not going to be shy about it. I'll give you my feedback, and it's that we have some concerns about administrative costs. I think that we're certainly within the guidelines there, but I do have a bit of an inclination to not be doing too many things and maybe be focusing more on maybe the top 2 being capacity building and production and preservation. I think that might help us achieve more scale. I think, making the bulkier part bulky. And I realize, and I think this has been a tension this whole process, is that we've got a lot of very worthy causes and very worthy issues to address here. I sometimes worry a little bit about spreading ourselves too thin, particularly given the context we're in. But that would be my initial feedback, not to say that I have any, negative really reaction to the plan as a whole. And
just to address that briefly, there would be other organizations doing some of this. There's already a continuum of care for the county and other groups working with homeless. So they would be executing that work. They would submit a program request to us, and then we would fund it that way. So we wouldn't be doing all this. The home buyer stuff, I don't believe any of that would actually be handled by our department. We're not set up for that.
Yeah.
Okay. You done, Mr. Werman?
I am.
Mr. Moody?
I was just going to say, Mr. Davis just answered my question. Man, when I look down at here, home buyer assistance and education, you've got the Habitat for Humanity groups, you've got pastors. There's got to be a process where we fund them, because they are set up to underwrite and consider those things. Community loan fund for down payment assistance, thing like that. 180 place for homeless initiatives. There's got to be some type of, Mr. Werman last time, measurables that they've got to send to us that say, okay, we're going to fund this out of here until that bucket dries up. Yep. So you answered my question and laid my fears. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Johnson.
Yes, sir. Mr. Davis, I don't think you were here when we talked about project for sewer and water on Dr. Whaley Road. You remember that?
Yes. That was during my tenure.
I'm trying to figure out where would a project like that fit in all of this money that we're talking about here. Maybe, have you given any thought to that, or since he might not be familiar with it, Mr. Grant?
A number of departments have looked at that, Ms. Johnson. We can give you something additional. In a nutshell, the challenge with Daniel Whaley was that there were not individuals on the property. They were vacant lands, and so that introduced a different dynamic related to Arpa, that it's not serving an individual. And I think there were some other issues of which properties were in the city versus the county and the legality of the road and things like that. So there was quite a bit with that. We can.
So we need to look at
come back to that.
And using the ARPA money, we need to make sure that we're dealing with existing home ownership, or
thinking of the shortest answer to that.
Okay. Or you can give it to me later.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I just want to make sure that you know that this is in my mind, on my radar, and I need to certainly flush this out so that I can speak to the constituents about it. Thank you.
Mr. Swears?
Mr. Davis, I would just like to reemphasize that I would love to see in all of our programs measurable results, and especially with housing, you know, if it costs the county taxpayers, let's say $50,000 per unit versus with another strategy, it costs us $20,000 per unit. I'm all about the $20,000 per unit because the demand is huge. The money is not huge. So I would love to see us develop ways to measure our results. And measuring results means you also include things like overhead, because that will be county tax dollars is included in overhead. So I'd be real curious to see if we can assign, you know, once these projects start to come online, what did it cost the county taxpayers for that particular unit?
Okay, yes, and that actually will be part of the process by which we select projects, is those that can give us the best bang for the
Absolutely.
buck in terms of units. I do want to remind council, though, that there are special needs populations that do require additional assistance to get there. So just keep that in mind as we do this, but we will have an eye to who's giving us the biggest bang for our buck.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. That concludes this presentation. So now we are going to move back to item number 2, where Mr. Mitchum is going to come and give us an update on the mass transit.
Weren't you number 2 on the agenda?
Yes, sir, I was. Let's see.
Save the best for last.
Oh. Put me to that. Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate the opportunity to stop by and share a little bit about how we're doing. I'm going to be very brief since y'all still have a few other items to take care of.
All right.
Let me start by telling you that ridership is up 16.5% year over year. So we continue to make that continue climb back to our pre-COVID ridership levels. One of the things that we're recently launched is in response to trying to make people more comfortable riding the bus, and as it related to COVID and other things, is cashless, contactless fare payment, so they don't have to touch things. They can simply download a pass onto their phone, wave it in front of a device, it registers, and then they can just simply get on the bus and move on. Just quickly, I'll mention the budget and policy, our proposed upcoming budget year. You know, we go through that process where we visit every jurisdiction, and we have completed that process, been approved by all of our member governments. You'll notice our budget this year is a little lower on the capital side because we won't be purchasing as many buses. We have all of our buses that we intended to buy for a while on site now. Currently working on the infrastructure to be able to charge all those buses. Most of you, I think, already know from our past conversations that our charging infrastructure is ready to go, with the exception of a key component called the switchgear. Has something to do with converting the power coming in to the power going out. And it was ordered mid last year and was supposed to be here in April, then June, then July, and then August, now October, maybe November. So we can't effectively use that. So you won't see all of our buses on the street at the moment because of that supply chain issue. So we're having to try to rotate them through. One of the good things that came out of our discussions with the contractor, which is also the supplier of those vehicles, is that they did extend the manufacturer's warranty on those vehicles, since we can't really get out there and run them, 15, 20 hours a day and really stress them. So as soon as you see us get that switchgear, you'll see us flip from those diesel buses to those battery electric buses pretty quick. So our transit stop master design guidelines has been approved, and we started implementing that, and we're starting to see the benefits of that. We also have an electric bus master plan. It's one thing to convert to the buses, but the other thing is to try to make sure we do that efficiently. So we're working with Dominion as well as some other folks on how to charge those buses as cheaply as possible and place as little stress on the grid system as possible. So other things we're doing is we're completing an air filtration installation on all of our vehicles. So we have a device on all those vehicles that's attached to the air conditioning system. As the air circulates through, it kills 99.8% of germs. So it's not just COVID, it's your typical flu, all those other types of things that typically hit us at certain times of year. So not only does it address the COVID issue, but makes it healthier for folks riding the bus.
We've received a couple of grants here recently. I'm looking at studies that look at extensions and expansions of the service. One for $560,000 is looking at the peninsulas. We've got a lot of new activity on the peninsula, new developments, so we're looking at how we expand service on the peninsula to pick up additional riderships, reduce the amount of vehicles moving around the peninsula. The second is $650,000 looking at that Highway 52 corridor from Muntz Corner down to 5278, where LCRT will be. So this will be sort of the second leg of LCRT. Again, I mentioned the electric buses, so now have 31 of those on the lot. We expanded our parking lot. We appreciate you letting us use the property across the street so that we could relocate some buses over there while we were paving and putting down concrete. So that project is complete. We now have all the capacity we need on the lot for the short term. So. Amenities, we continue to add. So we've got 103 pads out there, and the way that typically works is we put the pad down, then we put the bench, and as the ridership grows, we add the shelter. So we have 37 standalone benches, 52 solar power shelters that have been added. Recently, Bosch asked us to, they're willing to fund a shelter at a location for their employees, so that project has been completed, and I think they'll cut the ribbon on that in the next week or two. You'll also notice we're doing solar lighting and digital signs. That program continues, so we continue to add that on an annual basis. Also point out we have the Country Go Vanpool. This is designed for areas where our service doesn't go or where we can't meet that need. So companies can work with us so that they can take groups of employees. They can lease a van. It's very inexpensive. Employees pay about $30 a month. And that's really all they have to do, and be there, be a good rider, be a good neighbor to the folks riding with them. And so we do have some out there on the street, but we still have vans available, so please let people know if they're interested. Give us a call, and we'd be happy to put them into a van pretty quick. And then Cart on Demand is something where we're partnering with Uber for seniors and disabled riders. I think you all know that we are required to provide transportation for folks in certain categories. Those trips can be pretty expensive. So this is a situation where we're partnering with Uber for folks who are not as mobility limited. In other words, they don't necessarily need a wheelchair. They may have some limitations. It may be eyesight. It may be that they walk with a cane. So Uber's an opportunity for them, works out well. It allows us, in many cases, it doesn't cost us but $5 or $6, which is a lot cheaper than if we had to dispatch a larger vehicle and schedule all that. So our usage is increasing pretty substantially. People really like that because we're able to schedule those trips within an hour as opposed to a day in some cases. So. And then I'll briefly mention Low Country Rapid Transit. I think you all got notice from me last month that we did get our notice from FTA that our project received an above average rating. So they have given us a commitment for $375 million, which is 60% of the project cost. I do want to point out that our cost looks very big right now. Looks like it's really gone up. And part of that is because we have to lock into that dollar amount. So it's 60%, but if our costs were to go higher, we don't get 60% of our costs. We only get $375 million. So we went through two comprehensive risk analysis process to identify worst case scenario when it came to cost and schedule. And of course, schedule affects cost. So that's where you see that new big number. That is sort of our perfect storm number. And so what that did is allowed us to lock in at 60% of that number, which is $375 million. We don't expect to hit that $625 million number. A whole lot of things would have to go wrong over the next few years. Our goal is still set to be open in 2028. So, and with that, I'll answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Ron Mitchell?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, sir.
You can turn the lights on.
First thing I want to thank Mr. Mitchum for the assistance that he gave to the Willtown Community Summer Camp and transporting those students that they had to the aquarium. That was the first time they had done that, and your efforts there and making that happen is very appreciative. So I'd like to see more of those opportunities out there
Yes, ma'am,
for special events.
We're looking for opportunities where we can educate folks on how to use the system, and it's great to do it with young folks. As you know, particularly CARTA, kids don't pay to ride CARTA, so it's a great opportunity, and we always want to try to educate them. Our new transfer center that we'll be doing at Shipwright Square is right next to the library, so one of the things we want them to do is learn how to ride the bus and go to the library, particularly in summertime when they got time to kill and things to do. And I know, Mr. Darby, you want them to stay out of trouble.
Yes, sir.
And we're looking also at doing something with the seniors in the future. Two other notes, though. The route for Ravenel to the Citadel Mall, I'd like to see us be able to increase the usage of that there if we need to adjust maybe the route some so that people would be able to utilize that service. I think it's a great idea to have that connection. The timing does seem to be a little bit, not usable at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, ma'am. We recently brought on a consultant to help us get out a little bit more and look at the changes that have occurred since the pandemic. We do see that there have been some changes in some of the routes and how they're being used and how people are getting from point A to point B. And so we certainly recognize we might need to make some adjustments. It's not the same world it was as far as our business, pre-pandemic. So, we've got to make some adjustments to make sure that we're getting the biggest bang for our buck. Because just like you guys, we don't have enough. So we got to make sure what we do spend, we spend well and get the highest level of ridership for those dollars.
And the last thing is about Edisto Island. I was just wondering, I know you had a challenge out there at one time getting people to medical appointments. How is that going?
Well, it's not such a problem. If they schedule, the problem we run into is people calling them and needing a ride in an hour. And that's difficult for us to do because we get booked up so fast. So it's really a communication issue and an understanding issue, and we have to plan ahead a little bit. And I think we're making some pretty good improvements in educating folks there. But it's also why we were trying to do some stuff with Uber, more central to the city area, so that we could free up the resources to be able to get a little further out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mitchum?
Mr. Darby?
I just want to say, sir, very much thank you for the altruism that you have evinced over the years, particularly with the children. I know you politic with North Charleston High School in terms of kids with ideas can ride the bus, and from there you went countywide, sir, for all students. And I mean, that's for you and your organization. Thank you very much because it's desperately needed, sir.
Yes, sir, and I got a couple more ideas I need to work with you on.
Sir. And I heard this may be a rumor, sir, but I heard that when you retire, that Kentucky Fried Chicken may want to use your likeness, sir.
For a small fee.
All right, sir. I just heard the rumor, sir. I don't know if it's veracity or not, sir.
A small fee, I'm available.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mitchum. Thank you, sir.
All right, anybody else? Well, thank you, Mr. Mitchum, for the presentation, and as always, it's a pleasure to work with you. And, anything we can do to lighten the load, let us know. Because
thank you, sir.
We all
Appreciate
here for the
your support.
citizens of Charleston County. Yes, sir. Oh, I got a quick question for you. If you don't have the answer, you can bring it back to me. So, we're in hurricane season, okay? So what happened if the grid goes down with all these electric buses? Do we have a generator in place to supply electricity to charge these buses?
So we're working on that. We have an arrangement, but we're looking for always looking for a better arrangement.
Okay, I was curious about that because everything's electric, and first thing you don't go down is the grid.
Yes, sir. I will tell you that our system has dual capabilities from Dominion. In other words, we're off of two different main lines.
Okay.
So, we keep our fingers crossed that if one goes down, it flips immediately to the other. So hopefully both of them won't go down, but we do have a backup plan if we had to bring in some auxiliary power.
All right, thank you. All right, anything else from this body?
Mr. Chairman, just one more thing, sir. Could you ask Mr. Tootin and perhaps Mr. Dykes to allow me to have, for the last 18 years,
of the fee in lieu and taxes, the amount of money that we have given in terms of taxes, as well as the name of those businesses, sir?
Mr. Dykes, you heard Mr. Darby, he'll get that to you.
All right, sir.
Yeah, he said, Mr. Tootin, you heard, this is, when you can get a term, please get a term for us. Matter of fact, make it available to all council members. You good with that, Mr. Darby?
Absolutely.
So that way everybody will have information on that, and then you will have it for yourself. All right, anything else to come before this body? All right, hearing none, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.